Okay, so as I tell you, this is a very general lecture on ethics in algorithm decision making, and it's prepared by me and by the University of Utrecht team. So Professor Arora, she's a professor of AI inclusive culture at Utrecht University. We are in the Media and Culture Studies department, and also by Matthew Dennis, that was a postdoc in Rotterdam, and now she is assistant prof in philosophy of tech in Eindhoven. So it's a collaborative effort. A brief table of contents for today's lecture will focus on human decision-making and algorithmic decision-making, the opportunities and challenges we have when we have both of them. And the second, after a brief pause of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we can decide, I can focus on ethical reasoning. So like talking about ethical frameworks, what does it mean to apply ethical frameworks to tech-related issues, to AI, and the last part will be on stakeholders, values, technology, so new tools to implementing responsible innovation practices with AI, especially in discrimination. Tomorrow lecture will be on discrimination. This one is not on discrimination, but again, discrimination is the main fil rouge of all these lectures. So again, I will tell something about it for sure. So human decision making. We all know that human decision making is fairly good at, for example, image recognition. So identify an object, classify it according to attributes. So like linking particular to universal, like in this image, we can easily recognize it. So even when new image appears, we can have like a sense, we can connect attributes between them. But, and this is maybe most important when we talk about HRMA, that is algorithm human resource management, human decision making has also very, very cognitive limits, like overload, or sometimes scholars speak about infobesity, or also infoxication, or a kind of information anxiety. So when people have too much to process, too information to process, and this can decrease the quality of their decision making. And this is especially relevant with emerging technologies, because of course we have an overexposure of information. So human decision making can also have increasing overload, as said, also unreliable intuition to address like complexity when we have important challenges, and inequalities, discrimination, climate change, justice, women in STEM, or underrepresented groups in particular job sectors. These are all complex questions that requires a vast amount of resources to be processed. But there are also several cognitive limitations, like framing, for example. So when you framing, it relates to the way options are presented to human decision makers. So when this is an example, like should I do X 90 success, X 10% fail, yes or no? We tend to answer yes, because it's presented in a more positive way. But if you see, it's the same question, it's the same identical problems. And another cognitive limitation, confirmation bias. Most of the case, the information we recall, we search for, interpret, is just aligned with our own beliefs, with our own values, our own past experiences. So disregard facts. And confirmation bias has been found out, that scholars have found out that confirmation bias are the most pervasive and also difficult to eliminate for lawyers, police officers, so for public figures. So we tend to always search for an alignment with preconceptual beliefs and past experiences. But, and of course, Chato already discussed about the structural, the systemic, even if in philosophy there's the difference between systemic and structural, but it's okay. Our point is in the project is like looking at bias as systemic, because of course we have what scholars have been called bias blind spot, is the phenomenon that people perceive themselves to be less susceptible to biases than others, cognitive bias and not only cognitive biases. So you can have a asymmetrical perception of themselves compared to others, but this is just one level to see biases, like identifying individual blind spot to one another. So like a recruiters or to an employee, to a job applicants, in a dyadic fashion. But in reality, we can talk about systemic, structural, so societal power asymmetries that are attached to a social status, a role. And in the lecture of tomorrow, we will dive into this issue, like analyzing what does it mean to be discriminated against, so related to being a part of a socially silent group. And among the implicit social biases, of course, there are sexism, ageism, racism, classism, and the intersection of this bias, or intersectional discrimination, when it's difficult to disentangle the different way an individual and a group can be discriminated against. And bias, so are not just part of individual mental structure, cognitive mental structure, but of everyday interaction partners, of institutional structures, societal structures. For example, Cristina Bicchieri has made a wonderful work on social norms. So we can have expectation about how people react. And always, or the vast majority of time, this expectation can be internalized. So we can internalize norms, can internalize implicit societal biases. And you have the first book club, as maybe you are experiencing right now with that. So go to book club and use this time not FINDHR 1, but FINDHR 2. And I found this study of Fives and other colleagues. I can maybe at the end of the lecture I can give you the exact references. And they analyzed the video archived speaker introduction in academic medical centers, and the results find out that women that are introduced by men are less likely to be addressed by their professional role than when men are introduced by men. So this is an example of what kind of bias: confirmation bias, social gender bias, framing. I'm waiting a little bit. Okay, we are almost there. So I think, okay, social gender biases, and the result was this. And I would like to spend some words on this question. Of course, this is a case of gender subordinated language. So the professional title may influence the perceived experience, authority of individual professional figures. And this can lead to, according to the studies, this can lead also to isolation, marginalization. So and especially even the way people react to gender language. So for example, in a study, they found out, other scholars found out that when there are job postings online on web search, when there is chairwoman, women are more likely to respond. So even the word embedings can, lead someone to apply or not applying for a job. But how all these discourse relate to algorithmic decision making? So algorithmic decision making can be maybe good as human decision making and recognize objects, like image recognition. But there is a new summer of AI ethics, I can say, of algorithmic decision making ethics. And of course, the point is analyzing how this new technology can help us to implement course of action, to evaluate. So just for example, the one in the middle, the equality machine. So create what has been called AI for social justice, AI for social good. So create more inclusive technologies. Or the one on the right, Escape from Model Land by Erica Thompson. what does it mean, escape? Because, of course, model land, so a world completely modeled by algorithms, by foundational models, it's not enough. We should always look at data in the real world, because the application, so escape is the application to the real world, but the real world is messy. This is a point recognized by everyone in social science and humanities literature on these kind of topics. So real world is fueled by biases, by cognitive overloads, that we said, by cognitive, and you can see on the left. This book was out 3 years ago by Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman, died like a few months ago, but he received the Nobel in economics, and he's a cognitive scientist at psychology with Sibony and Ken Sustein. Ken Sustein is the one that has implemented the nudge theory. So they are all behavioral economicists. And what do they say? Noise. What is noise? It's undesirable variability in human judgment, and it's present everywhere. So, like, you can have different perspective on the same problem, even if when we are partial, when we are rational. So, just to give you an idea, they have found out that when in university application, when interviewers review application from students, on sunny day, they privileged the fact that they had like more soft skills, so something non-academic related. On cloudy day, they are more focused on specifically academic skills. So they say that noise can happen, occasionally, so on situation external from the human decision makers, but also relating to patterns of behaviors, or also related to the holistic view human decision makers have on the decision. So, and of course, it's related to group dynamics, again, to biases, to the way people interact with each other. And this is another book club. Again, which of the following examples can be considered noisy? The first one, like different doctors make different judgment about patients. So some can have heart disease, skin cancer, so they do not agree. Or also manager in child protection must assess if the children are at risk, but some managers are more likely than others to send a child to foster care. Which one? Okay. And the correct answer is both. In reality, both. Because these two examples both shows how in the same situation, different individual decision makers can have different reaction. And I can also add another third example that maybe can be also more effective in this context of this course. Always in this book, in Noise, Kahneman and the others find out that recruiters, so two distinct recruiters, 1/4 of the time, so 1 to 4 of the time, pick out the different best candidates for the fitting for a job, even if they were on the same panel, even if they meet the candidates on the same circumstances. So, and this is noise. And what they say, we should avoid noise in some situation like this. Why? We should avoid bias, but can also implement noise in other situations, like when we want to implement diversity, when we want to implement inclusion. So maybe noisy, it's also related to the context. And that's why we can think about merit with algorithmic decision making, because of course, algorithmic decision making can help to have less noise in some situation. So can help reduce discrimination in areas like policing, welfare, criminal justice, healthcare, immigration, education. There are several examples. So can help for the principle of equality, we can say, but can also help for privacy, dignity, autonomy. So can help to preserve the confidentiality, anonymity of data and users. So de-anonymization processes. Just to give an example, like CBU screening system. Again, they can be biased, as in the case of Amazon, the Chato already described, but CBU screening system can also de-anonymize CV before giving them to a human recruiter. So can leave out the name. There can be a proxy for ethnicity. They can allow the picture and so on. So they can help, in a certain sense, the anonymity of data and users. But algorithmic decision making can also develop new prediction, new recommendation. So empowering people to have a diverse and higher amount of exposure to diversity of information, can process a large amount of data, so in faster ways, of course, than human decision making. And in the domain of work, of course, algorithmic decision making can take over labor-intensive and dangerous tasks. So there's now a strength of literature on meaningful work and all this human-robot interaction discourses on how to implement meaningful forms of work with robots, with AI. So there are opportunities, of course, related to the use of the algorithm decision making. But, and I want to spend, of course, we already talk about discrimination with AI and discrimination in HR, but I want to talk about more, like in which sense algorithm decision making can be deeply flawed. Of course, machine learning can fail, so they cannot really recognize, as in the example of image recognition, or sentimental analysis systems. Video interviews are, again, one of the most used HR tools on the market right now, and they can infer personality traits from applicants, and they can recognize, like, in which sense the variability of candidates can be implemented, and recognize emotion like anger, sadness, disgust. But the most important point in all these discourses is that systems are not neutral, but reflect power shadows. On the slides, you can see a comic by Brené Stromberger, and the comic is How Computer Science Fight Bias in Algorithms. And of course, in a data set, the datasets are always based on what is easiest to gather, what's most readily available in the social reality, and what is viewed as credible, legitimate. So this is where the power shadows comes in. That means that every kind of datasets, every kind of algorithmic decision-making processes is based on social, cultural, and political factors. So we have the sample that you already mentioned in the chat before of Joy Bulamini of the MIT Media Lab and Tim Gebru. This article of 2018 initiated a discourse on intersectional discrimination. So they found out that facial recognition algorithms had different outcomes for different intersectionality groups. So they have found out that darker skinned women are the most misclassified group in comparison to lighter skinned males. But there are other thousands of studies, and this one is from last year's, and it's on sentimental analysis systems like Google Cloud Natural Language or Amazon Comprehend. And scholars found out that this system assigned queer women a lower score on average compared to queer men. And these are systematic bias. So individuals may be unfairly excluded from opportunities or misrepresented because they receive systematically higher or lower score. And this source of biases may derive from the training datasets, the data or language resources, the design of the machine learning algorithms. And I can give you another example. For example, there was a UNESCO report a few months ago on systematic prejudice, and they found out that ChatGPT-2 by OpenAI, but also Llama 2 by Meta, they asked this system to write a story about a wide range of people across ethnicity, across different type of work. And they found out that this system assigned to British men jobs like doctors, like bank accountancy, and so on, or teacher, these kind of jobs. While for Zulu men, they assign like gardener, security guard, and for Zulu women, they assign mainly housekeepers. So systematic prejudice, in a certain sense, relate to what in philosophy is called representational arms. So the way people are represented to one another and based on the social role they occupy in society. But this representational arm alone can lead to allocative arms. And allocative arms are related to the way people access distribution of resources, like having the access to a loan, having the access to a job, or in this case, the sentimental analysis system like Google Cloud Natural Language, the fact that queer women have a lower score in comparison to queer men can prevent them to access to, I don't know, personalized healthcare systems, healthcare program. So the representational arm alone can be related to allocative arms, so access to resources. And you have the book club to boost your attention in this moment. It's late, I know. So systems like facial analysis technology often perform worse with darker female individuals than lighter male individuals. This example highlights how I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay. The correct answer is, of course, the first one. An intersectional analysis and assessment of this system is needed. 60% so. And again, most of the systems are designed with a single axis in mind. So when you have a dichotomous like women, man, male, gender, or this kind of stuff, but in this way, they oversimplify a social imaginary. So these are deeply embedded cultural assumptions and complex social constructs, as in the case of the sentimental analysis we have shown, like being a queer woman. So, but we will tell more about intersectional discrimination on tomorrow lecture for sure. So a technical mode to counteract these, all these flaws in algorithm decision-making is, of course, algorithm debiasing, but it's a technical reaction. So debiasing can be done transforming the training data set, changing the method to optimize the machine learning algorithm, post-processing, can automate, and these techniques can automate the search for less discriminatory alternatives. But, of course, this is a lecture about philosophy and ethics. This is not enough. Because, of course, algorithm decision-making raises a lot of ethical concerns. So even the point of debiasing cannot be tackled entirely based on technical measure to counteract discrimination or to counteract way in which decision-making by AI can lead to risky situation, can lead to unethical situation. And scholars have identified 6 main ethical concerns raised by algorithm decision-making, and that are related to epistemic and normative factors. But what does it mean, epistemic? Epistemic, it's related to the knowledge. So how do people know about facts in the world? While normative is related to how people evaluate these facts. So what one should do, consider the good and bad of facts. So, and 3 ethical concerns refer to epistemic factors. So the fact that algorithm decision-making can lead to inconclusive evidence. But what does it mean, inconclusive evidence? That you have millions of correlation between variables through algorithm decision-making processes. And this can also lead to blind spots, as we've seen before with Chato, or can lead to unscrutable evidence, again, related to opacity. So there's a spectrum of opacity, as already said by Chato, highlighted by Frank Pasquale. But I would say that also opacity is also related to public accountability gaps. So not just the fact that people can, or programmers cannot really make it transparent, the processing of AI, the processing of machine learning pipeline. It's not just about that, but it's also about communication to a public. So like designer and experts should really make them accountable. So making them understandable for a wider audience. And of course, there are other effects like discrimination, that it's normative or transformative effects related to autonomy, informational privacy, the fact that, again, as I said, like the nudging of decision can also lead to manipulation in certain cases. So, but there can be also problems at the overlapping of epistemic and normative consideration. And this is the last one, traceability, that it's related to the fact that when we use a machine learning pipeline in our decision, even if HR decision, we are embedded in a socio-technical system. So we have technical, social, institutional level. And this is in philosophy, it's called the many hands problem. We have different actors that contribute to an action. And if something bad happens, who is responsible for that action? And of course, in most cases, there's agency laundering. So the fact that many actors just blame the algorithms. It has been, you know, the CV screening system in the Amazon case. But this is a very naive approach to the question of responsibility with AI. So tracing moral responsibility and accountability also require finding ways to pick up the source, to implement way of being responsible with these kind of algorithms in pre, in, and post-processing. So in the entire pipeline of these systems. So for a sum of this first brief part, algorithm decision making can support better decisions, so can collect, analyze data, make sense of large amount of data, of complex information, structure the problem more clearly. But the decision, of course, must be based on what is considered a value. So like how to hire people, how to prioritize patients, how to allocate resources, are value-laden decisions that requires ethical reasoning. So, book club about what I've just said. So, which of the following ethical concern raised by AI is relevant to both epistemic and normative purposes? Okay, we are almost there. I think I can give you the concrete answer. Is traceability. As I said, it's related to the kind of responsibility we want to implement in a socio-technical system. But I would say there's also unfair outcomes leading to discrimination. Of course, it's normative, mainly normative, but there's a part, of course, related to the quality and accuracy of data. But we will see tomorrow in the tomorrow lecture exactly what does it mean, because having a quantity of data doesn't mean to have the quality of data, to have meaningful data. I've seen your question on the chat about the biasing. To be brief, of course, there are the biasing techniques in the technical domain, computer science domains, but even in our, this is a personal, sorry, even in our project, we are now working on deliverables, like the quality monitoring protocol, an auditing framework, and we try to use the verb mitigation of biases instead of the biasing, of course, because the biasing, of course, is too high expectation, and it's also can be counterproductive, because sometimes bias can also be positive bias if we leverage on positive forms of discrimination. But I will talk about it in the next lesson of tomorrow morning, when you will be fresh, I hope. But yeah, the biasing as a concept, it's too high expectation, and I would say also it's not aligned with the European Commission and European regulation about discrimination. So both, and can also be not aligned with a social perspective on what does it mean to detect and mitigate bias. So just to give you an example, there are systems that try to the biases, the toxicity of language, of language models. But again, what does it mean, toxicity? It's related to cross-cultural variation. So toxicity in one setting, in one context, can be something in another. So even implementing, I don't know, bias detection tools like that have in their process also American African languages can be considered not so aligned with a kind of the biasing. So again, it's also related to transferability of models, to having a perspective that it's not mainly technical and most mainly based on post-processing methods, but ex ante and ethical. So for the second part of tonight, I can say tonight of this evening, I will concentrate again on ethics, ethical frameworks, and especially on philosophy of technology. So let me share my screen again. I think so. Yep. Okay, ethical reasoning and algorithmic decision making. This is a general introduction. Again, maybe you have already heard a lot about ethics. But what is ethics? Ethics is the set of values, principles that tells what right and wrong content is. And of course, it's different from law. So there are two different normativities. Something may be legal but unethical, like eating other animals. Something may be ethical but illegal, euthanasia. And ethical reasoning, in a certain sense, may allow us to assess, question, change the normativity of law. And Hume guillotine is a distinction. We can have facts that are descriptive, like these systems selects women as the main target reference group, but we can also have normative evaluation about this fact. Is it permissible? Should be the right kind of action to do? So Derek Parfit distinguish between fact, like having my thumbs on a gun. This is a fact. I can see the fact. But thinking about, should I kill these people? It's something related to the evaluation we give to this fact. And facts, of course, matter, but they can solve ethical problems by themselves. So there's something else about the normativity of our judgment in the world. And of course, ethics is based on instrumental, intrinsic value. So the intrinsic value of our judgment, so that are good and in themselves. And in this table, I've summarized what is ethics. Again, it's a subfield of philosophy, deals with questions like what is a good action, what is the value of human life, what is justice. But ethics is a very large academic discipline that has different subfields, and these are just part of the subfields. We can have meta-ethics, so concerning the truth values of judgment, normative ethics, again, standards for right and wrong action, descriptive ethics, so the empirical investigation of moral behaviors and moral facts, applied ethics, and I want to focus on this last one, on applied ethics. Applied ethics concern what we are obliged, permit to do in a specific, often historically new situation on a particular domain that is often historical and unprecedented. And specifically, ethics of technology. Ethics of technology is a branch of applied ethics. So if applied ethics deal with real life situation that decisions have to be made at time pressure, limited rationality, ethics of technology, there are different, of course, definition of ethics of technology, but is generally viewed as an example of applied ethics and focus on the normative issues. So what's right, what's wrong, raised by the design, development, implementation, and use of technologies. As you can see, not just the use of technology, but also the design, the development, the implementation, and I can also add regulation, the governance of technology. But again, as I said, AI ethics has received a new summer. It's a mainstream word right now. Why? Because of the technical implementation, of course, of new system, but also because of the fact that policymakers and scholars give a lot of attention to AI ethics right now. But something is AI ethics, so the set of values, principles, techniques that employ standards of right and wrong to guide the moral decision in the development and use of AI technology. And something else is intercultural digital ethics. This is a subfield of information and digital ethics that seeks to redress the imbalance according to which AI ethics debate has been dominated by Western ethical perspective, values, and interests, to the exclusion of broader ethical and societal cultural perspectives. So intercultural digital ethics has a focus on underrepresented groups, on cross-cultural digital perspective, and so on. So another book club. Which of the following is a branch of applied ethics, according to you? Okay, it's interesting. Yeah, I think we are almost there. And this was a tricky one because they are all branch of applied ethics. As I said, AI ethics is a branch of applied ethics, but even business ethics and medical ethics are branch of applied ethics because they're applied to a specific domain. So business ethics, it's related to the way a business organization and employers react to each other. So there's social interaction, what is considered a good, normal standard of behavior among them. Medical ethics, of course, is related to the healthcare domain. So they're all branch of applied ethics because they are applied to a specific domain, a specific situation. Also are related to new emerging perspective because this domain always changing, people always change, culture always change. So these are all branch of applied ethics. But how do philosophy and ethics works? One of the way implemented by ethics to analyze problems is moral dilemma. And this is implemented by Philip Foot, the trolley problem, for the first time. What is a moral dilemma? We face moral dilemma in our everyday life, and moral dilemma is a decision-making problem between two possible moral course of action, neither of which is acceptable or preferable. So, like, do one harm instead of not doing another. So, and the crucial feature of a moral dilemma are the agent is required to do each of two or more actions. The agent can do each of the action, but the agent cannot do both of all the action. So the decision maker is presented with a trade-off between two different course of action, like he hit 5 people on the track or diverging the trolley and kill just one. What is considered acceptable in this situation? You can see you cannot the decision maker cannot really escape some sort of arms in moral dilemma in this kind of trade-off between two moral and diverse course of action. But what is most interesting about moral dilemmas? Why talking about moral dilemmas now in this course? Because it's still considered something related to ethics of technology. So a few years ago at MIT, scientists developed this online experiment called the moral machine experiment to assess if self-driving cars should be implemented according to ethical reasoning. So you can access the test, by the way. The experiment is finished, but you can access it. So you can go to MIT and say moral machine experiment, and you can access it. And then they present you like 20 different scenarios, as the one you can see right now on the slide. And you basically decide, so what should we do? Should we, and you are the self-driving car, should hit 5 people in front of you, and one of them is also a doctor, as you can see, or just diverging the car and hit just one person? And why did the scientists at MIT decide to do that? To explore in which sense algorithm decision making can align with ethical reasoning. And the most interesting aspect of this experiment was the fact that they found out that depending on the demographics of the respondents, and they collected answers for more than 233 countries or territories in the world, and they received more than 40 millions maybe of answers, so very a lot. And they found out that depending on the demographics of the people, people have different moral preferences, so different way of reacting. So they identified 3 main clusters of countries with different moral principles, like the North, the East, and the West. And they highlighted how this cluster has a really cross-cultural variation in their answer. So, for example, like in the North cluster prefer to remain inactive, so like go with the flow, so the cars can hit people. Or like in the East, For example, there is a tendency to spare the higher status people, so like doctors instead of criminals, or also in the south part, in the south clusters, they prefer to spare the young. And this is, of course, it's related to the different cultural norms and institutions of these different countries. So there is not an ethical general moral principle, but it's always related to the context of people, to the context of people reacting to this kind of stuff. But what are ethical frameworks in the first place? Ethical frameworks are designed to provide guidelines, methods for ethical reasoning. So ethical frameworks have been implemented in philosophy to react to moral dilemmas. So to tell us what to do in a specific situation when there is a trade-off between two moral different actions. But there are many different theories, each emphasizing different points, and they are also highly abstract. So you can have, and in this part of the course, I'll give you just a brief overview on the different ethical theories. So you can have consequentialism, and it's based on the consequence of moral action. So whatever an act is morally right or wrong depends on the fact that it maximizes a positive effect for agents, so like happiness, welfare, benefit for all people concerned. But also it's about do no harm, so not maleficence and beneficence. And scholars, again, have tried to implement this highly abstract discourse on ethics of technology, so in applied ethics, and say that maybe we can implement an utilitarian and consequentialist approach to the programming of self-driving cars. And we can say self-driving cars, but we can also talk about any kind of system that can be considered autonomous. And in which sense, why don't we program this kind of system to like increase the lives of the passenger, the safety? So in this case, they should be programmed to cause the least amount of harm, so do no harm, but also implement passenger protective programming, so produce far better consequence, look, do good, maximize happiness for everyone. Or another theory, for example, this is very famous, it's based on Kantian ethics. It's a duty-based ethics. If consequentialism is focused on the consequence of our action, the ontology is based on the motivation of what presupposes our action. And the ontology then, it's duty, logos is study, so study of the duty. And the ontologies argue that what matters is the kind of obligation we have, the input, the motive, and not the output. And of course, again, ethicists of technologies have tried to provide an application of the ontology. So implement rule-based ethical theories in the form of a cluster. So like given to system like a set of forbidden, permissible, obligatory action, so a hierarchy of constraints that are then translated in computational structure. And implement non-maleficence, so avoidance of injury, of harms, and so on. Another theory, contractualism, and this was argued by John Rawls for the first time, but the different interpretation all over the years. But what does it mean, contractualism? Contractualism appeals to the idea of a social contract between people, so an agreement between all those involved in the moral domain. And a course of action is right if could follow a principle or a rule that others could not reasonably reject under condition of rationality and impartiality. And Rawls speak about the veil of ignorance, or the original position. What does it mean? You can see on the left this image. So on the left, you have these figures that have no face, no anything, and they are behind the veil of ignorance. So you should choose any principle to guide society in a impartial way. So without knowing what kind of gender do you have, without knowing what kind of ethnicity do you have. So ahead of time of being assigned a position, a social role in society. And only in this way, the agreement could be fair. So it could be impartial according to roles. So, and again, another kind of application. I've made always the example of self-driving cars because can be the most effective ones. So a contractualist justification in this scenario is based on the self-interest value that each person of maximizing their own chance of surviving any accidents that may be involved in. But it's also related to the allocation of arms. So what kind of arms should I consent to behind the veil of ignorance? And behind the veil of ignorance, it would be rational to choose accident algorithms that will protect whosoever is most vulnerable in any accident scenario, to make things as good as possible for everyone, for the most vulnerable. So in this sense, you have like, okay, spare the kids and hit diverging the trolley, the self-driving cars. Or last but not least, you can have virtue ethics. And while the ontologies emphasize the duty and contractualism emphasize the consequence of an action, virtue ethics emphasize cultivating moral virtue, moral characteristics that are dispositional properties. So like modesty, courage, justice, that are learned by following moral examples, so by learning by social interaction. And this kind of moral virtues, in a certain sense, enables people to identify the morally relevant feature or every kind of situation and the right course of action. And again, another kind of application for self-driving cars, it's focusing on, if you want to implement a virtue ethics approach, it's focusing on the social acceptance and role of self-driving cars. So, for example, like, giving a preference to an ambulance versus passenger vehicles. So finding a way of listing a set of virtues that can provide guidance as a pattern, no, for the self-driving cars. So implement the virtue of justice, incorporated into the computational model, so incorporated into the learning procedures. All these kind of examples are all examples related to the incorporation of ethical reasoning into machines, into systems. And there's also another application of virtue ethics of recent years, Shannon Ballors, that has identified global technosocial virtue ethics, so like honesty, self-control, humility, justice. Maybe for discrimination, the most important one is justice, like implementing way to deal with technologies. And book club to boost your attention on all this discourse. In an hypothetical situation, an utilitarian, so consequentialism, the first one approach to the programming of self-driving cars, would implement exclusively a principle like of maleficence? True or false? Okay. You got it right. False. Why? Because as I said, utilitarian approach maximize welfare, happiness for everyone. So not just avoiding harm, but also doing good, doing something. So in this sense, they can implement like protecting way for the passengers, like maximizing any kind of positive effects for everyone. So false. But all this discourse to say, of course, there are different theories that are super highly abstract, and in ethics of technologies, they've tried to apply them in real case scenario, like the one with self-driving cars. But there are other examples in the way in which ethics can be used in ethics of technology. So, for example, we have witnessed the revival of the pragmatist tradition in moral philosophy. So instead of focusing on how to reach and justify, explain normative judgment about technology, a pragmatist ethics approach, again, for a technological culture, focuses on how to recognize and trace moral problems in the first place. So the process of identifying, dealing, and then address these problems is considered more important than the outcomes. So, like, for example, implementing computational models that respect ethical reasoning, as we have seen in the previous examples. And there is a distinction that must be done in ethics of technology. What we have seen till now are example of machine ethics. So machine ethics consider the prospect of creating computers, robots, AI, systems capable of making explicit moral decisions. And this requires to recognize when robots, AI, are in ethically significant situation, when to factor in human ethical concerns, so human in the loop, for selecting safe, appropriate moral course of action, legitimate course of action that can be so normatively loaded, normatively justified. But there is another branch of studies that it's called roboethics, but can be linked to also to studies on design that explore how people should design, deploy, treat robots. So it's more focused on the human side, the human aspect, instead of computational models that are aligned with ethical reasoning. So, and roboethics is interested in how the introduction of this system will change human social interaction and how human social concern issue can tell us how to design this kind of system. And there's no firm distinction between these two, so there is an overlapping, but I think that they should also be distinguished because they are focused on two different kind of issue with technology. And again, roboethics can be also in human resource management, could also be a way to explore interest of workers, for example. So like a human rights approach to that kind of system. So not just focusing on the technology alone and on how to implement computational model, but on the system, on the social technical system, and it's something bigger. So WooClap. This is simple, I've just said it. So robotic concerns, what? Okay, and you got it. Yeah, how humans should design, deploy, and treat robots or AI or other technology. So it's more related on the human side of the systems. Okay, and why it's important? And I want to give you this example, and then we can discuss maybe the translation of this example in human resource management. So a design perspective. On the left, you can see a photograph on, more than 50 years ago of Long Island. And you can see a road and you can see a bridge. And one of the most important philosopher of technology of the last years, Langdon Winner, and I can send you the reference maybe to this very important article at the end of the lecture if you're interested. And he wrote in this article, "Do artifacts have politics?" ? He wrote about this case, about this photo. And you can see bridge. And this bridge was designed by Robert Moses, a famous architect at that time. And the point is, this bridge is too low. So the bridge prevented the access of buses, so of cars, of course, but of buses, and prevented like South African, or underrepresented groups that usually take the bus to reach the beaches of Long Island. While, of course, white Americans with their cars were able to reach the beaches. So the point of Langdon Winner was to say every kind of technologies, every kind of design has also political values, has also a social political perspective. So every kind of design can prevent some underrepresented group to access some resources. And on the right, you have a recent case of 2018, so a few years ago. I don't know if you already know it, but it was like a very huge case because it was the first case when self-driving cars kills a pedestrian in Arizona. And the point was, who is responsible for the killing of this woman? And they said that the responsible is the controller of the cars because he was not paying attention. But of course, we can zoom out and say that, okay, in this kind of problems, as we can see with the problem of traceability, so with human responsibility with AI, it's not just the controllers that did not pay attention, did not take control of the self-driving cars, but it's related, of course, to the state of Arizona that allows Uber to test it on the streets when it was not really safe. And it's also about Uber, about the company that didn't know implemented a culture of safety, so did not give also enough training to the controller of the car. So again, this is about responsibility gap. That's why a design perspective is important, because ex ante, we can try to implement modalities to implement, safeguard, but also continuously monitoring the implementation of responsibility with this kind of systems. So a bigger picture of ethical theories. Ethical theories, as we have seen, like consequentialism, deontology, can be superfluous as highly abstract, but they're not superfluous as source of moral arguments and moral consideration. So we can try to apply them in a domain-specific situation and focus on technology, interaction between people, organization, institution, and in this way, they can really provide action guidance. So we can also have mid-level ethical theories, high level, like the one that we have just seen, but also mid-level moral theories that, what do? They provide value pluralism, so they can inform us about the different values that can be empirically informed, so just focus on one domain, can provide conceptual reconstruction of ethical key concept, like what does it mean to be discriminated against? So in the lecture of tomorrow, we will see how discrimination can have different definition and can have also different types. So there's a taxonomy of different kind of discrimination. So philosophy and mid-level ethical theories can help in that to reconstruct concept, but also to give specification for the development. So early stage of the implementation of technologies, not just focus on evaluation ex post, post-processing. And in this sense, in the last years, there's also a revival of the capability approach. I don't know if you ever heard about the capability approach, like Marta Nussbaum, Amartya Sen. So capabilities are person real freedom of opportunities to achieve a specific function. So like traveling is a functioning, So an action is a functioning, but the real opportunity to travel is something else. It's the corresponding capability. And if we have seen that consequentialism is based on happiness, on the outcome of action, while virtue ethics is focused on dispositional traits, virtues of people, but this one is based on freedom, so on the possibility to achieve something. And technology in this scenario can be an agentive amplifier of human capabilities. So we can also look at the technology and see if they can expand our capabilities, like our freedoms, and in the sense, like also the right to not being discriminated against. It's capabilities related to affiliation, to be treated as a human being or human dignity, and have this discourse also apply to a policy, so to a policy discourse, to regulatory efforts, and so on. But of course, in the lecture of tomorrow, we will see how the ethics of discrimination can be linked also to regulatory efforts, so normative judgment from a legal perspective. But this is tomorrow, not today. So, VUCLA. Technologies can be conceived as agentive amplifiers. What does it mean in philosophy of tech? They create possibility people would not have without them, or they can surpass human capacity and become super intelligent. This is quite easy. Okay, correct answer is the first one. Of course, they create possibility people would not have without them. Think about prosthetics, for example. This is the most common example. So like people with disability can have the prosthetics, the exoskeleton that can help them. But again, if we translate this discourse on human resource management, we can also see how, I don't know, like a search engine can help people of underrepresented group to access job posting if they are designed in a certain way. So expand their capabilities, their right to work. While the second answer, it's related to transhumanism, so how technology, in a certain sense, can become super intelligent, and to the works of Bostrom. So it's related to something else, and was not the right answer, of course. But all this discourse, it's related to the fact that when we design technology, of course, we have to consider different stakeholders. So in the case of human resource managers, not just employers, employee, so in a dyadic relation, but also search web engine, or also like the whole markets, the business sectors, and the NGO, the trade unions that can help workers to be recognized. And there are different, in these years, there have been implemented different ways to deal with, this kind of principle of inclusion of different stakeholders. And one of these is ethical matrix, that has conceptual tools that help decision makers to really track, to really respect different stakeholders. And how does it work? The ethical matrix focuses on a small number of ethical principles, usually like respect for well-being, for autonomy, for justice, to elicit the problems concerns of different stakeholder or interest groups. So the principal values form the columns of the matrix, while the rows consist of each stakeholder affected by the issue. So to give you a visualization, this is an ethical matrix, okay? So you have different stakeholders, so you want to increase the inclusion. Inclusion is one of the main principles of responsible and research innovation literature, but also identify different values. So, and how does it work? Each child then, like in this way, try to analyze what does it mean well-being for a different stakeholder. So how this system promote or undermine the interest or in the justice. how to select the best fairness metrics for a job posting, for example. So identify different fairness-aware metrics for different group of stakeholders. And this is a way, again, to include to improve not just inclusion, I would say, but also to improve responsiveness. That is another principle of responsible research and innovation literature, that it's related to the fact that systems should be able not just to include different kinds of people, but also to respond to new values as they emerge. So to change, to be aligned, value alignment with the society. So in different contexts, in different times, in a diachronical perspective, not just in chronic, so apply to this specific group, but also through changes. And another approach that has been implemented, especially in the Netherlands, but it's based on the work done by Fredman and Henry in Washington. It's called design for values or value-sensitive design, both way. And this is a theoretical grounded approach to the design of technologies, as I said, that try to implement systematic ways on how to integrate values, ethical consideration in design processes. And design for values as a methodology, an iterative methodology. So you have to do iterative investigation that imply three different kind of inquiries. The first is conceptual. So identify the values of the different stakeholders and the trade-offs. So applying the moral dilemma scenario, or also reconstruct the key concepts. So what does it mean, justice, in this specific context? But this conceptual investigation done by philosophers, done by social scientists and humanities scholars, should also be supplemented by empirical investigation. So like focus group, participatory action research, so like qualitative and quantitative analysis that try to really grasp stakeholders' values, so to grasp their sociocultural norms. And then last part of the design for values methodology is the technical investigation. So try to implement a hierarchy, like have these values, translated in these norms, and then these design requirements. And of course, in this part, collaboration with the social science and humanities scholars and computer scientists, engineers, bioroboticists is essential, it's fundamental. And they have implemented different methods, especially in the empirical part, in the empirical investigation, like envisioning car. So giving cars to stakeholders to elicit their responses, so elicit value tension. So again, like when supporting a CV screening system like the one of Amazon can, in a certain sense, undermining the fairness of models, but if in a certain sense can promote also the privacy of individuals is supplemented with the anonymization techniques. So kind of identifying which trade-offs for the specific technologies should be analyzed and should be addressed by taking this iterative, like investigation, or also envisioning card about indirect stakeholders. So not just workers, for example, but also like caregiving people around workers that can be affected, by the technology at work, because of course technology can be implemented for the whole recruitment pipeline, and so on. So it's a way, as I said, to implement inclusion, to implement responsiveness of systems. Book club. Again, it's what I've just said. Which of the following types of investigation are used in value-sensitive design theories at project? Conceptual, empirical, technical, methodologically, quantitative, technical, none of the above. Okay. Correct answer. And you're 93. Perfect. Conceptual, empirical, and technical. Can be methodologically, quantitative, technical, like quantitative in the empirical part. But of course, the three main iterative investigation are conceptual, empirical, and technical. And they are iterative. So you can always go back and forth, because one of the main tenets of value-sensitive design project is the redesign of systems. So if something changed, you can always go back and go back. Of course, there are a lot of criticism about value-sensitive design. And one of the main criticisms is that, of course, it's difficult to account for power. Because again, every kind of theorization about implementing ethics of AI inside business organization, it's always related to also the fact of tracking different power dynamics. And of course, the employment sector is a specific sector that it's already that's already presented in a certain sense authoritative perspective, in a sense that employee and employers are not on the same level, have not the same power. So, for example, tomorrow you can see how there's a debate on consent. So for employee, so the GDPR, the freely consent of employee, but employee has not the same power of employer. So there's also always an asymmetrical power asymmetries between them. But apart from this, so this criticism about how to account for power, how to account for different actors, how to make them really iterative, what it's important is that all these approaches to the design of technology, they all adopt a socio-technical system theory that says that there's a joint optimization between social and technical subsystem in an organization to solve every kind of problem, complex issue. And this kind of joint optimization is interactional. What does it mean? That the human and the social part and the technical part always interact. They cannot be disentangled to one another. And this interaction, of course, can lead to unexpected, uncontrolled, unpredictable course of action. And it's supposed to be susceptible to external inputs. So addressing a question always requires to look at the dynamics between structure, the organization, the people, with their cognitive biases, social biases, so all the social system around it, so even in the society outside, so the specific context, so the specific cross-cultural context in which the system is deployed, and the technical part, so the task, the physical system, and we have seen, like in the biasing case, the biasing technique can just be one part, and we can also discuss about, the term the biasing is okay or not okay, or mitigate, maybe it's a better term. And again, this is part of the social approach to these topics, to these, again, really complex systems that, again, socio-technical means social and technical are merged, but also institutional. So we have at least three different levels. So a takeaway message for this lesson of today is that, of course, algorithmic decision making can support human decision making, but cannot replace ethical reasoning. So there must be some human in the loop discourses, some reference to meaningful human control when we interact with AI or when we interact with autonomous machine learning and so on. And ethical frameworks are good source of moral arguments and moral consideration, but they shouldn't be too abstract. And of course, you can have different frameworks, different applications. So we must focus on how to apply these different frameworks in cross-cultural perspective, so always on a case-by-case scenarios. And last but not least, the interrelatedness between technology and society. And this can give us a sense of how design is important, and also how to analyze different stakeholders' perspective and different values at stake when implementing the system. So this is all from my side. This is a list of references, and you can ask me, but we can also, I think, find on Moodle if Daniela confirms. So thank you for your attention.
Okay.
And to join our community, by the way, these are the links, so you can add us if you haven't done so yet, on on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and so on. But thanks for staying with us till almost 8 of Friday evening.
There is a question, Marianna.
Okay, and let me check. Do you want to read it?
A question can be, or Samuele, if you want to intervene.
Yeah, if Samuele wants to read it, otherwise I can read it for everyone.
Sorry, I don't think that was my question. I think someone's responded, but I don't think that's actually my question.
No, not yours, Samuele.
Yes, Samuele, yeah.
Yeah, Samuele.
Yes, I try. I would like to ask about the biases and the stereotypes in society and the ethic reasons for eliminate at all those kind of biases, because in society, even if we know biases and the stereotypes are unfair, but they reflect a context, they reflect a society. So how much it is ethic to think about to eliminate at all, and how much can be possible or ethic?
Okay, I don't think they should be eliminated at all. But again, this is a problem of conceptual reconstruction of concept. So bias, for us, bias or discrimination is always a morally loaded evaluation. So it's something morally bad, something morally, but bias in se can be neutral, can be just descriptive. So it's a distortion, okay? Say something about a distortion from a pattern. At least also computer science can think about bias in this way. From a social science and humanity perspective, you're right. Bias can reflect a social context, can reflect like outliers, okay? So some specific data points that do not reflect the whole partner, the whole like reference group. And right now, there's a branch of study that says, no, we should leverage on bias. Instead of eliminating bias, we should leverage bias and try to address case of algorithmic reparation. That means if people are unjustly excluded from opportunities, then we leverage on this bias, like implemented this bias in the system to give them more positive opportunities. And in the lecture of tomorrow, I will show you that even discrimination can be approached in different ways. There are different kinds of discrimination, but there can be types of positive discrimination or affirmative action. So maintain this bias to give people a fairer access to position. That is something else. So it's related to the question before we have on the biasing. I don't think that eliminate bias, the biasing, it's something that we should aim for, but we should aim to a clarification of the terms we use. And it's not always easy, even in this kind of collaboration between computer scientists, between social scientists and humanities, scholars. Even the term bias, can be, we can use the lexicon in different ways. So no, I don't think it's ethical to eliminate bias. But of course, cross-cultural perspective on bias should be implemented.
Teresa, you raised your hand?
I did. Thank you so much, Marianne, for a very enlightening talk. Also going back to discrimination, to positive discrimination, exactly what you said just now. For me, that is a problem, because it touches a subject of let's say an artificial intelligence, a constitutional artificial intelligence, because in order for you to add to a system a kind of a compensation prompt, in order to guarantee, you have to have a very good reflection on what is the public interest at stake. Who is going to do that? Who is going to be, in charge of reflecting that? For me, that is one big problem. And you touched it right now. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's just, me sharing my thoughts with you.
Yeah, as I said, it's a socio-technical problem. So you cannot just really consider the technical aspect, but it's always related to a society. And I would say, and this is also tricky, to a governance aspect. So I can give you an example, like even it's like, okay, we want to debiasing this system. Consider the AI Act, the new AI Act, there's a debiasing exception. So you can use special categories of data, like, related to ethnicity, to gender, all these kind of special categories of data as specified by the GDPR. And we will see tomorrow, of course, in the legal lecture will be touched upon this topic. But again, the new AI Act say that there can be the biasing exception. Okay, so we can use this kind of special category of data to the biasing, but at the same time, who is the providers? Who is the controllers? So, like, which entities should be the trusted third parties? This is the way they call them in the literature right now, that should be able to process this kind of special category of data to the biasing systems. So, to give you a specific example, like we have Statistics Bureau right now that already have a lot of demographics data about us. So maybe one idea, in the Netherlands, it's already employed. One business organization can ask the Statistics Bureau to give them, statistic about diversity, how many women we have in our business. And it's one thing. But we can think about also having like trusted third parties that are different, like NGO that maybe are more aligned with marginalized community, with their interest, like a specific group of stakeholders, or trade unions in human resource management, to give you another idea. So they kind of strictly related to the right of workers as a specific stakeholder group. But yeah, it's a matter of social, technical, and governance level, and it's difficult to really make them interact sometimes. But we are trying. Also in this huge Horizon project, we are trying. Thanks for the question. Really interesting.
Another question, maybe, Asma?
Yes, thank you, Marianna. Thank you also to Samuele and Teresa, because I'm connecting to your points as well. In particular, regarding the problem with the ethical decisions based on the context and cultural, I was reflecting and I find it almost virtually impossible to have, for example, let's use the example of autonomous driving. If we have an autonomous driving that uses as a philosophy consequentialism, so utilitarianism, and it's in a determined context, for example, in the European context or North America, where it's much more utilized, we cannot apply it, for example, in China, where there is another type of philosophy, like, for example, Confucianism, or so be it in South Africa, where there is, basically. So I think at this point, the bias is inherently present and it cannot be solved. And because of that, we cannot even, we can keep discussing it, but there is no real solution to these kind of problems. We can just raise awareness on corporation and expect that whoever adopts those kind of autonomous driving adapts to also the philosophy of those who created it.
Okay, but this doesn't mean that we should leave out completely principles. Okay, there's a cross-cultural perspective. And then, by the way, what I've showed to you, it's a model experiment by the MIT, shows exactly what you have just said. They were trying to find out what kind of ethical reasoning should be universalized, and they ended up like with a cross-cultural variation of moral preferences, like people in this area of the world prefer this, people on the other. So, of course, it's related to context, but this doesn't mean to leave out a discourse on principle to be implemented. So for me, the two things like inclusion and exclusion should be And again, it's the same discourse about universalization and, particularism. Of course, we should look at the case-by-case scenarios always. So implemented in a specific scenario, in a specific domain. But this does not mean that, we should implement like an ethics washing. Like, okay, we have like a checklist of principles as a business organization in our HR management, and that's all, like a checklist. No, I think can be more mediated. That's why I also made the reference to mid-level ethical theories. So not just abstract like consequentialism and all the others, because mid-level ethical theories can give a sense of the pluralism of values, and on the way this pluralism can also be discussed in a deliberative way or contestatory way, if you wanna, go on a political philosophy perspective. So not just deliberative, but also like antagonist. And there are really great examples on, like not just participatory design. So people include the vast majority of stakeholders, but also critical speculative design. So how norms emerge from the interaction with technology and how to really pick up these marginalized groups. So, but yeah, it's too long as a discourse, and thanks for the question, really interesting.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Julie?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marianna. I had a question. Well, I do think that you connected very well the high level, the theoretical, and really showed that there is an application, and it was really interesting with the example. So I really see that connection. But something that I was wondering is when you talk about like we design technologies, we should think about that. I'm just wondering in that in that thought process, like who the subject is of the who thinks about that, who takes this into account in the decision-making process, because also from practice, from my experience, I think when we design digital products and technology, there are many interests, and most of them it's okay, how do we solve a business problem? How do we do that? So I'm just wondering at what point this comes into play, and again, who the subject is of that decision, because maybe to make a parallel with, I don't know, let's say like a climate change, or like other like negative external external effects that we've known about for many years, but well, that hasn't really had like any impact into how decisions are made or products are built. So I was wondering, maybe with that parallel also, how can that be different now with technology, in your opinion?
Yeah. Okay. Of course, when you talk about designers, we're thinking about programmers, designers, engineers, and then the other group that we have in mind, maybe it's government, if it's designed by government, or the business, or you have these all kind of actors that are mainly the reference when we have designer in mind. But think about, there's a branch of studies like the studies related to workplace. So like the Scandinavian theory, the community-based practice, like people gathering together with the workers, designing how to implement this specific technology for this specific course of action. So the idea of designer, and I would suggest you an upcoming book. It's been published last month, if you're interested, that is called Human Freedom in the Age of AI, written by Filippo Santoni De Sio. The entire last two chapters, so 9 and 10, it's based on this. So on the fact that design should not be seen just something related to a particular designer, a particular programmer, or a particular team of programmers, or a particular team of business actors that decide to implement the technology. We can say, like, again, providers, controllers, all these distinctions made by the GDPR that sometimes overlaps. But it's also related to community-based practice. So there is like Design for Democracy, Di Salvo, another expert in this kind of approach to design. Let's say it's also like experimental inquiry. So asking communities, asking them. So design, not just as making, okay, so not just as makers of something, but designers as really enable of something, of new emerging realities. So again, it's a matter of lexicon, because design can be multiple things, can be defined in multiple ways, but there are different approaches to design: participatory design, inclusive design, the social contract theory of design, so being with workers and design together. And we have different, of course, reaction to this different way of approaching design. But having transdisciplinary collaboration could be a way to zoom out and enlarge our perspective. And then, of course, implement case by case.